There we go. So one of the big things that we see a lot, there's a lot of searches on, people come in, they tell me that their major issues are panic attacks or anxiety attacks or anxiety or stress or these type of things. And they tell me that they've been everywhere and nobody's really helping them get where they're trying to go. Uh, the issue with this is that a lot of times we think of the body and the mind as completely separate entities, and they're not in any way. They're entirely intertwined. You really can't separate one from the other. And this is one of the major problems that we see with depression, anxiety, panic attacks, anxiety, all these other things, is that we don't recognize the way that they're intertwined. So just kind of like we do for PTSD or depression, the first thing that we always want to do is reset the biochemistry. We want to reset the metabolic function. And we've talked about this a lot, the idea of, people being hangry, everything's fine and they get too hungry, their blood sugar drops, so their metabolic needs are not being met. And then what ends up happening is that their emotional needs come out. They're, grumpy, pissy, angry, cold, tired. You feed them and everything comes back to normal. So what we have to understand from that is that panic attacks, anxiety attacks, depression are all still, they have a major function in that realm. So going in and restoring nutrients and fixing those things is a really, really big help. One of the things I like to do is to pull DNA and look at things like COMT, the co-methyltransferase. That one is an interesting little job, because if you look at you have normal, then you have not enough and too much. And so these are tied to how we both function. So when we don't break down these neurotransmitters, so COMT is the speed at which we break down neurotransmitters. If we, specifically catecholamines, if we don't break them down fast enough, then what ends up happening is we have too many left over. And this messes with sleep. This messes with, the way your mind just spools up on stuff. And so that's basically the met if you're looking for the genetic function. And on the other side, the val, they break things down way too quickly. And so what ends up happening is that you don't have the dopamine sitting around in your body to make you feel happy anymore. So there's different ways of addressing this. I like to use hydroxycobalamin, which is a form of B12, to feed the body and nourish it so it can do what it's supposed to do. But when we have too fast a breakdown, one of the things we can do is increase the function of that. So there's all sorts of gut things that we do and bring that back up, and that's fantastic. One of the bigger things that you want to do is detoxify the body, get the processed chemicals, get that stuff out of the body. So that's going to be, obviously kill and refill. So we're going to kill all the parasites, kill the yeast, bring down that source of inflammation. Then we're going to feed the kidneys and feed the liver, specifically kidneys in this case. Eastern medicine talks about the kidney being the wellspring of life. This is why kidney castor packs are so fantastic at reducing anxiety attacks, panic attacks, altering mood, that whole thing. So that's a very, very big piece. If you've got anxiety, your kids have anxiety, you guys have these other things, even some ADD stuff, castor packs on the kidneys with far infrared heat, fantastic. So that's a big piece. So once you kind of get, and we talk about this a lot with PTSD, once you start getting the metabolic stuff fixed, which everybody's got, it's one of those things where you look at, well, where are we getting all this stuff? Processed foods, high stress environments, not enough sleep, not enough clean water, not enough exercise, like all the things that we talk about. It's funny because, the vast majority of the time when I ask a patient, how much water are you drinking? Their answer is not enough. They're like, oh yeah, I know I should drink more water. I'm not. Okay. So your body cannot detoxify, can't move these toxic chemicals out. And so you're literally sitting in a stew of toxic waste. So yeah, cool. Make sure you get that water out. But at the same time, a lot of these people have massive deficiencies in magnesium and selenium and zinc. And, all these things are super important for normal function. Once you get all of those things dealt with, that's more of the metabolic stuff. And I glazed over, that could have been 4 hours of conversation. Once we kind of get that piece back, the other problem is that what ends up happening when you are in a nutrient deficient state, when you have low testosterone, when you aren't exercising, when you're not doing all these things the body requires from a metabolic standpoint, what ends up happening is that we fall into this depression. We start having really negative thoughts, and we start, worrying about everything. We start, fearing the future, which is anxiety. We start, looking around and seeing the things in our environment that are not where they want to be. And so that brings up a lot of sadness. And then you recognize the things that are giving you, fear of the future. You look at the things that are giving you issues today, and you realize the inadequacies of the things in your life that might be, or you might feel is your fault. And so now you feel guilty about those. That's where stress is. That's the definition of stress. Fear of the future, which is, fear in general. So, but fear of the future would be your anxiety, but fear, guilt for not having those things already dealt with and fixed, and any of the other issues that you've got that you're dealing with, and over guilting from loved ones, the church, society, whatever it is, and sadness that these two things are happening. So that's what stress is. And so what ends up happening is that when you're in this state for a long time, you really get good at finding all the things that you should feel guilty about. You get good at finding all the things that make you sad. You find all the things that make you afraid. And social media and the news really, really help with instilling, pushing, driving, and making this stress paradigm stronger and stronger and inescapable. And so what we actually have to do is, once we've gone through and been like, okay, we're going to start fixing the biochemical piece, you still have to fix the mind, because you have to take them. You have to be like, okay, the reason that you see everything is negative, or the reason that you see all the bad, or the reason that you are worried about the future, whatever, is because that's what you're focusing on finding. That's what you're focusing on looking at. What you have to then do is be taught to look elsewhere. So it's one of those things where you have a lot of bad in your environment. I'm not arguing about that. There's a ton of bad, but there's just as much good. You're just not looking for it. You haven't been taught to look for it. In fact, the funny thing is that you don't have to be taught to find the stress function, because everybody who's in power has figured out that if they force on you the stress environment, it puts you in a very negative position that your body doesn't want to be in, can't survive, can't thrive, can't function in. And so then they go, oh, now that we've shown you all the bad things, here are some ways that you can, avoid the bad things if you do these things, and they can sell things to you much easier. That's one of the biggest things that they do, that marketing people do, is they find the stress points. They find the pieces, the things that are making you uncomfortable. And then they, sell you the solution, which is fantastic, which is great. However, you are then accustomed to, always shown, like, look at all the health guys who are out. Microplastics are killing you. Oh, these things are killing you. Oh, you're going to die if you eat these. Okay, we get it. Like, there's a lot of bad out there. So what you actually have to do is you have to be taught to find the good and stuff. You have to be taught to find the path towards joy, towards happiness. So that's one of the things that we're solely lacking. The Freudian model of psychotherapy does not do a very good job of that. I would tell you that it reinforces the stress paradigm, because you're asked to associate into these horrible events, these things that make you sad, the things like, let's go find the thing that really makes you sad, the thing that makes you uncomfortable, the thing that, and then let's ruminate in it. Let's sit in it. Let's talk about it. Let's not let it go. Let's really think about those things that make you sad. So again, that pushes you into that function where you're just living in and dealing with it. So what you actually do is you have to set, this is more of the Alfred, Adler model. This is more the Pavlov stuff, more psychological conditioning, the more, that type of thing, where you have to teach yourself to find the good in all the things. Gratitude's one way, specifically setting out, steps along the path to, create good and find good and be amongst the good and see the good in things. A lot of times you can take something that you look at as, all the bad things. So, church is a great example. It's real easy to be like, oh, well, churches just want your money and they just want to indoctrinate you, and they just, they're, XYZ. Like that's just, that's just what they are. All right, cool. Well, if you and a bunch of guys got together and you had this great idea to start a farm, I'm just going to make something silly. You're going to start a farm because you know what? You want better food. But you don't have enough money to do it. And but you and your 6 buddies do. Well, to provide this farm with the tractors and the seeds and the water and the help and all that, it takes capital. And so what ends up happening is you and your 6 friends all put capital in together, and you can give you the things that you want. That's kind of how churches actually work. It is a group of people who come together with a philosophy and an idea, and they say, these are the things that we think should happen. This is what brings joy to the world. This is what it does X, Y, Z. And then everybody who then goes and becomes part of this group and reads the philosophy and is taught the philosophy and goes, yeah, I agree with this philosophy. Cool. Then throw some cash in and we'll be able to sustain and grow this idea. And that's kind of where it is. And if you decide to look at the church from a very negative aspect, you can find very negative things. If you choose to look at it with a positive attitude, you can find a lot of positive things. And it just depends on how you're looking at your world and what's going on with you. Right now there's a whole lot of people who are looking at the economy. They're looking at, what's going on with, the administration, and they're seeing lots of negative. And there's lots of negative to be seen. I'm not saying that that's not true. The other side of it is that if you can't do anything about it and it's dragging you down, you need to learn to let go of it and find the things in your life that you do have control of that are hyper positive. And they're always there. Always. So all you have to do is just recognize those. And a lot of times it takes somebody to help you kind of find, because if they're blind spots, it's really hard for you to see your own blind spots, which is why they're called blind spots. But a lot of times you can have somebody just walk you through it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, man, things are a lot better than, I thought they were. Great. Here's how you keep seeing it. Here's how you do that. Here's how you open the loop. Here's how you set yourself up to be actively looking for all of the good in your life. And as you start seeing it, you can start reframing some of the bad stuff. You're like, okay, like this is terrible. You're like, oh, that's an opportunity, right? Like we've got all these things going on that aren't great. And that's true, but here's all the ways we can solve it. And so we can take a lot of people and elevate their income, elevate their quality of life, elevate their status, like elevate all the things. We just need people to do some work. Here's the path through it. And once you start to see it, you can start kind of moving your pieces so that things start getting better for you. And this is one of those things that happens all the time. I have a lot of people who are like, if I just had more money, I'd have like all my problems be solved. And money does help solve a lot of problems. The thing is that I know a lot of very wealthy people with a lot of problems. So it doesn't, that's why money doesn't buy happiness. You can make the argument that it rents it. But the thing is that comes, that comes from inside. There's been studies done specifically on money where after you reach a certain amount of money, and I can't remember what it is, I want to say it's like 100 grand. It could be 100, it's going to depend on where you live. So let's say it's 150 grand. Like once you've made 150, 400 doesn't really change your quality of life. Once you have your car and your house and your food and your vacations and all that stuff, it doesn't really, once you have your needs, more money doesn't really change your life. What it does is it just, adds to it. Like having a much nicer car than having a car doesn't really impact quality of life that much more in the long run. So, you might get to an 8 because you have a car. When you have a really fancy car, you're at like an 8.5 or a 9. But, at the end of the day, that's not where it is. It's how you look at your life, and it's how you position yourself within your world to recognize the good, to see the good, to be benefited by the good, to be have your mindset shifted because of the good you're choosing to find. And this does require some work, because everything important requires work. But that's kind of where that thing is. So a lot of the stuff that we need to do for stress, we have 2 components. And we're starting to get on some of the biochemical stuff. There's still a giant gap that's there. I see it every single day. But there's a giant metabolic piece, but we're also missing the giant psychological emotional piece, because the psychological emotional piece is one of the best ways to decrease stress and anxiety and utilization of all sorts of damaging things. So what's going to end up happening is that when you get both of these things together, you're not going to get sick very much, if ever. And so what ends up happening is that you are no longer profitable for pharma or the medical system. And this is why they don't teach this. And this is why we have done our societies and everything we can to not talk about spiritual, psychological, or emotional growth, or even how to do that, or the fact that it's even a thing. You go through high schools and like, that's not a thing. It's not taught, which is exactly what it should be. It should be 100% taught towards the end of high school, and which 100% should be mandatory for all colleges to teach, because that's where function happens. The reason it's not is because our school system is actually set up to make workers, not productive citizens. But that's one of those big things. So if you haven't gone through that, I would highly recommend that you find somebody who does it. I like it through NLP. I like it through the Adler model, which focuses on emotional function, purpose, and family. Like that's where that side goes. And that's where I like to look for all the mental health stuff. So if you guys are looking for that type of stuff, get a hold of us. We can help you guys find it. We can walk you through it, or we can help you find coaches that do it. If you want to start coaching people, I know the guys who teach those guys. So hit us up, questions@chalmerswellness.com. And we'll see you guys in the future. Have a fantastic day. Thanks for your time.